and gender-based violence. The statistics are grim, the numbers are alarming, and so we join experts around the world who are actively trying to rectify the situation that we unfortunately have found ourselves. But before we get into the introduction of guests and the question and answer segment, I would like to present some of these statistics to you so you understand why this has become a matter of constant discourse. Now, sexual and gender-based violence is not just the issue that is peculiar to women. It is a societal crisis. There's domestic abuse, sexual harassment, there's harmful traditional practices, emotional violence, and too many lives are unfortunately shattered in silence. Women, girls, boys, and even men are affected. Of course, the scars go beyond the physical. Now, we have 70% of women who experience gender-based violence. 1 in 3 women will experience gender-based violence in their lifetime. In Nigeria, about 401 women reportedly died as a result of sexual and gender-based violence in 2022 alone. And according to data from the DOHS, that's the femicide dashboard, there are about 149 deaths in 2024, and as of April 2025, there's been at least 17 incidents and 19 deaths. And the Lagos State DSVA reports that at least 300 domestic violence cases has been reported on a monthly basis. And that is why today on the program we would explore how families, community. Dr. Tᴏɪᴛᴛ Aᴅ, who's project manager, REST:OHLᴏ, EHAI, that's Equitable Health Access Initiative Nigeria. I also have Olufumi Olaoshun, who is a little bit closer to the microphone so we can hear you. Thank you so very much. So we've established what the conversation is going to be about. So I guess we can begin with Dr. Tᴏɪᴛᴛ Aᴅ. Let's talk about the understanding on sexual and gender-based violence. What does it mean to the average person who doesn't understand this concept? How would you explain sexual and gender-based violence?
All right. Good morning once again.
Good morning to you.
Good morning to the topic. Sexual and gender-based violence is any violence that is committed against a person because of their sex or their gender. And like you put out in your statistics, it's more common with women, and there are a lot of things that, could lead to that. So it usually involves coercion, making people do things out of their own will because of based on their gender or their sex. So we have different types. There's the sexual violence, which most people know, which can be termed rape, and it can happen to either genders. Can happen to both male and female. There's also emotional violence, psychological and emotional violence, where the perpetrator is trying to use sentiments, manipulation to control the victim or the survivor. And there's also economic violence, and that's because maybe the perpetrator has the means or more financially endowed than the victim, and use that. Women tend to be the victims is because of the gender power dynamics, where a man is usually viewed, as being more powerful, more influential, and it's been entrenched into so much of society and beliefs keeps being passed on from generation to generation. It tends to make people believe that the man is stronger, the man deserves to be heard, most of the time when there's a lot to talk about it. I think maybe I should just pause now. And
yes. No, we understand. It's okay. I mean, we can broaden the conversation, and it's glad you mentioned all these things. That gives us the foundation to build on. So let's talk to our development expert here. Very beautiful. Thank you for being here. Let's talk about how the children come into play in all of this. Dr. Aᴅ has highlighted, yes, that it could be men and women, but we forget that the children also constitute the family, and violence is also perpetrated on them, either directly or indirectly. So let's talk about how the children come into this. How is it that this sexual violence, gender-based sexual violence, affects the children within the context of a family setting?
Children, and the problem with that is it's harder for children to speak up, right? Especially when certain things are out of place. I mean, you can imagine even in school, we hear about teachers actually doing stuff. And I think this is why it's important for parents to be able to teach their children what is right and what is wrong. Sometimes I see some parents talk about how they teach their children what is wrong touch and what is right touch. And these are very critical things. But I think another perspective, she talked about cultural norms, gender-based violence. For example, we still have female genital mutilation in some places, right? We have child marriages. These are, in quote, cultural, but they're actually gender-based violence, and it's still happening today and is acceptable today. So with children, the work is even more, because you need to train, because they're innocent. I mean, and maybe this is, and most times when you study and you research, those that maybe finally we get to find out that they were abused, you've realized the vision. Right. See a child, for example, that correcting, to tell children that this person is on your lap, because that's where it starts from. And when it comes to sexual and gender based, it's not just about, oh, they physically maybe inserted. It could be using an object. It could be touching the child in very inappropriate ways. So it's very important that we can, and really help.
And this is a specialized program for women and children, which is why I, in my intro, highlighted that, yes, men are affected, but we need to focus on the majority, and the majority of the victims are women. Land 98.3 FM is our handle on Facebook and on YouTube, so you can join the disparity that exists, especially with culture, because you had mentioned that. So how is it that there is a disparity between violence in the rural and urban centers? Would you say that the violence is more in urban centers, but we're more hush-hush about it, or is prevalent in the rural area because of lack of education, lack of exposure? Because for female, convinced an uneducated woman who has been indoctrinated.
So that's the thing, when we talk about the disparity, I think we even had a conversation around this recently.
Right.
Because of the challenges with getting data, particularly because of, but yes, circumstances in the rural areas come into light, like just what you said. There are things that are culturally acceptable. So for me, based on what I observed, I feel like the difference is the fact that with the rural areas, they may see, we know this thing is happening. Yes, we know it is wrong, but there are still circumstances and factors that make people, when survivors eventually speak up, they are still silenced. But things like educating in the rural areas, right? Then also with the fact that, when it comes to the development, I mean, if somebody has a case, we have major rules, regulations, and enforcement that ensures that, okay, when somebody actually reports, this thing is actually dealt with.
Structures we need to put in place. So if you're just joining the program, we're talking intensifying action against sexual and gender-based violence. Olufumi Olaoshu, development expert, and Dr. Divine Akpan, project manager, REST:OHA, Equitable Health Access Initiative Nigeria, EHAI Nigeria. These are my guests this morning, and we have started the conversation about what is responsible for this. Very are dismissed. For example, victims don't speak up is something she said, and we know why they don't speak up, and I would like you to also reiterate why they don't speak up. Concerns about stigmatization, being ostracized from society. For example, there are men, and I'm sorry to deviate, who will say, well, you've gone through female genital mutilation. A person has been raped before. I don't think I want someone that has been raped in my family. So what are the other things that you think forces victims of violence to be quietly secret? So talk to us about why victims continue to remain silent, and how we can encourage them to speak up about their situation.
Yeah, and I think you reported, if you know the iceberg, the iceberg phenomenon. What you see just above the water is just a little tip of what's under. And so all the cases that have been reported is just that tip.
Right.
So there's still a lot of things that are not yet reported, and it's normal. Some women actually believe that it's normal for their husband to beat them.
Exactly.
Or even their children to beat them. And there's another point I need to mention here. It's sad, because studies have shown that in cases where you have domestic violence, especially against intimate partners, where a man is always beating his wife, it's a guy. If it's a boy, in that kind of circumstance, it has grown victim because she has normalized it. Those are some of the things that make people not to talk. Normalizing it, believing that, normalizing this gender power dynamics, that this is happening. So what are the beliefs in our society? What are the cultural norms that, keep, because I'm a man, doesn't mean that I can't ask my wife to help me, or does it mean that because I'm a woman, I can't speak, I should remain voiceless? That conversation might start. So I don't know, there's just so much to. So I'm looking at intimate partner violence now.
Yes.
Because it's just one part of it.
It is necessary, yeah.
Looking at intimate partner violence, why will the man keep being violent? And there's so many things. It could even be because the man is going through some problems, he's having economic challenges, and the woman is always asking him for money, and that kind of clashes. So it's for them to come together. Let's have a conversation about what's happening. Then for those other violence that, occur, some unknown guy just going to rape another woman, it also boils down to the same gender dynamics. Why do some guys believe that the only way, there's a lot of self-reflection, and especially some things that have been passed on to us. So it's not going to be out there that we need to change. We need to change the dynamic. We need to change what is at the root cause of this. And then when people actually become victims of sexual or gender-based violence, we need to encourage them to speak out. It won't be fair if a woman has been raped or has been beaten by her husband, she goes to a law enforcement agency or the hospital, and even those people are not being friendly or receptive to them. It actually increases the trauma. So there's a lot that we need to do as a society, as individuals. I know the government may have had some structures like the DSV and, some other government agencies.
Bringing that individual angle, every time we always point to certain people.
Right.
There's a very recent case that we can point to. There's a lady that said she was at the spa and something happened. And she made a statement. She said, the police people, of course, they said it in their local language, and they said, what's a small girl like you going to the spa for massage? And I remember going through different comment sections, and one thing was common. People kept saying, you mean somebody was doing this, you did not speak up, you did not talk,
victim blaming.
Just victim blaming. And that's why people need to understand that when it comes to trauma responses, there are different types. I know anybody can say, I would have fought, I would have hit him, but there is a trauma response that is called freeze, and interesting, she said she didn't freeze. Now, of course, there was the angle of people saying that, maybe she was paid, she wanted to get money. Now, that could also be a very feasible, but we need to shift from that mindset of first. The interesting thing about that case was even the person she was accusing admitted to it, that yes, he did it, but he thought that she liked it or she was in support just because she did not say no. And that's another re-education we need to start re-educating. No. Somebody will say, even like we talk about men being abused or women being abused, say, and she didn't stay, and that's why I continue touching her. No. Actually come up to speak up. It was very sad. I remember when she started, she said something. She said she knows that when she's story, investigate properly, because of course we've seen cases where people blame people wrongly, but investigate properly, and then we can come to a conclusion, not just from the very get-go.
I'd like us to once again talk about the children. Yes, what are the effect that this have on children? Let's even make believe scenario the child is not being assaulted, it's the mother who's hammer and say my wife hits me. You would that
Are
would
you not a man?
that
Which
would
is
be
part of the society.
you will be in trouble.
Exactly.
People will mock you
exactly
through the entire
Victim
corners
blaming.
of the earth as a man. So men just are a child is watching their mother being assaulted or their father being assaulted. Maybe occasionally they get assaulted. There was a case that I read about doing research about this thing where the son, in a bit to stop the father, shot him. Me to the conversation around what are the consequences that these things have on children. She mentioned a few. They can become perpetrators or even become victim, but
just like you said, she said, because that comes under psychological impact. Whether we like it or even if they don't become perpetrators, has been in that situation, they see this thing happen, and maybe the parent that is receiving that abuse doesn't fight back, doesn't leave. Such a child may grow up thinking it's okay.
Yeah, that's what my mom used to do.
That's what my mom, it's okay. I remember watching a video. A lady said she'd been married for 32 years and her husband used to beat her for all 32 years. And it's not, I know sometimes we say, maybe they don't have money, that's why they don't leave. She had her own money. She was from a reputable family. So they could grow up to this angle. Some of them even become victims of narcissists. So they think, the way he loves me, he's expressing his love by hitting me, by beating me, because, these things happen. So that's like that she said, the vicious circle, it continues. And such people may probably not transmit it to their own children and their children. Sometimes they may not necessarily be able to function effectively. I mean, we talk about PTSD. I know in this part people don't talk about it enough. There's PTSD. People suffer from such. It might have happened years ago, but there are certain things that may trigger them. And maybe they wake up, they have nightmares, things like that. So it's a whole lot, and there's emotional, it's a whole, that's why it's a mental health. So when it comes to addressing it, that's why we say there's no one size fits all. It literally is a multifaceted approach that we need to use and everybody has a role to play, including those of us listening on the call today.
Right. I'll be back to Dr. Aᴏᴜ in a bit, but let's talk about the fact that people don't listen to women anymore because they say most women have weaponized in the man's life. They didn't really happen, and some men will say, have I signed a written consent before she comes to your house, amongst other things. So would you say that, and there have been a few instances where truly the women wrongly accuse the men. So do you believe that incidences like this one is why the community as a whole, the society as a whole, is always first thing they say is she might be lying. She probably consented to it, but because he didn't maybe give her money is why she's trying to spin the narrative. What say you about women who have weaponized this very sensitive situation?
So unfortunately, I don't know if you may have noticed, but it's very evident there seems to be that gender. So that distrust between both genders, it has led to that. And like you rightly said, there are women that have lied, and which is why when I was referencing that case of the lady that went to the spa, I talked first that clear investigation into the matter should be made. But when we already conclude without hearing from both perspectives and getting like a holistic picture,
there's a confirmation bias.
Exactly, because you see, when it comes to SGBV, people say, where's your evidence? What evidence do you have?
You don't hold your phone when a man is approaching you. How would you know he's going to assault you?
You're not expecting it. You're not expecting it. Imagine, okay, that's where, so yes, we probably would need even the legal system to be, I don't want to say to do, but do more work. I think that's the word. So that when victims speak up, there's a process to say, okay, let's investigate this matter. You're not shutting them down. And for women, you are doing a disservice to other women happening today. So women need to do better. And where there are issues like this, where it comes up, oh, this is what is happening, to support, you understand? So
very unfortunate. Dr. Aᴏᴜ, let's talk about the support that your father, to think about it even makes me want to puke. But then it's a real life situation, unfortunately. It's the reality of a lot of girls. How do you even approach your mother to tell her, well, dad is touching me inappropriately? Even as a set up an environment that allows for ease of conversation. This has happened to me. How do we do that?
Wow, very interesting question. So if anybody reports that they have been a victim of sexual assault or gender-based violence or whatever, first of all, believe. That's the very first thing. Believe them. And when I'm saying believe them, I want to go to the mother or whoever they want to go to. So let's look at it from this angle. If anybody comes to you, you can just be the first support that they can get to before they even go to the authority, before they go to law enforcement. Because first of all, just everybody, let's support. If anybody comes to you to say, I have been a victim or I've been a victim of sexual, it's not going to be easy. But if this is going to be a call to those listening, if you ever find yourself in that situation, please, first of all, believe that person. Just being given a listening ear is the very first support that you can give. Then let's even talk about the other structures, the government, the healthcare system. All of these structures that we need our people to be trained on how to help out with these people, with survivors of assault. Whenever they come, they should be more sympathetic, more open, more understanding, because the whole trauma that they've been to is not every case, every report, the investigation,
same level of attention.
Yes, the attention and the investigation. They investigate. Just investigate and let justice, be served. And aside from that, and I think this to support. So survivors too are coming out as a strong force too. Well, all these people need training, and then survivors too supporting one another. The problem is sometimes you might feel a bit overwhelmed that, oh, can I do everything? But everybody needs one another. There's so many people, even those who are doing it on their own, the survivors network connect with them. The government agencies, anyone that you can connect with them. These structures are available. But because it's not who has been assaulted, please first of all give a listening ear and then help the person, into getting redress.
All right. I'm sorry. I would just like to reiterate what people are listening, because people are asking what we're talking about. We're talking about intensifying action against sexual and gender-based violence. You just heard the voice of Dr. Divine Akpan, Project Manager, Rest for Her, Equitable Health Access Initiative Nigeria, EHAI Nigeria, and I also have Olufumi Olaosun, Development Expert. Those are my guests. That is the topic. Please pardon me. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, so I just wanted to add to what she said. That and even if you don't know what to do immediately, there are organizations that actually work with survivors of SGBV. I mean, EHAI is one. The project that she's the manager of, which is Rest for Her, creates that support for survivors. But we also, in Lagos State, for example, we have the agency, Lagos DSVA, very active organization. People can actually refer to that. You just observe, because remember I said something about observation. So interestingly, if you mention children, a mother may, if you as a neighbor observed something odd, or maybe even the child was bold enough to in school, exactly, you could actually take it up and anonymous,
because teachers notice things too.
Exactly.
A student comes in and is sleeping all the time. They're out at the house. Even it's crazy that even helps service providers within the house. I don't want to call them maids, but you know what I mean. Who are supposed to take care of these kids on time. This is not a story. Most of that I've spoken. For a moment, think it's okay. It was not. It didn't pay me. I was perplexed. He said, this is a victim.
That's
who
the
says,
normalization.
It did not pay me now. It was nice.
Yes, sir. So that's
you were assaulted.
That's the normal, but they don't see that. It's just like when he keeps around, we say people, she's a prostitute or something. But if a man does the same, it's like, oh, you are doing a great job. So for them to, it's part of the manly transition. You are transiting into.
You find some parents actually encouraging
that.
So
yes,
so you can become a man.
Yes. So, but there's something I wanted to pick on, which talks about sometimes, like I said, observation. I know we may not have symptoms, but there are things you can point out. Withdrawal is one thing. A child that has been active or very intelligent in class, suddenly the child is dropping. Suddenly the child doesn't want to talk. Suddenly, the child comes home and is sleeping all day. You need to be very alert to see and understand, and then ask prodding questions, because even in asking questions, of course, you have to be as gentle as possible, because sometimes they will still not want to talk, but you can give them time and not also force them to talk. Sometimes when they are ready to talk,
just be available.
Just be available for them to talk. Someone rightly says, there's a lady, she also has gone, and she's not, like she said, she's helping others, and she said sometimes these victims just want to run too. She said there are some people that you help them, maybe the husband is beating them, you find out they go back to the man.
So sometimes they just want to
Stockholm syndrome, exactly. So sometimes listen and then take action. Like I said, you can refer to organizations if you don't know clear on exactly what to do.
Before we round off the conversation, I want to talk about religious houses, and I'm going to pick my words very carefully, because I don't want certain people to feel like they're being attacked, but it is a factor to consider, which is why I'm using the generic term religious houses. I'm not speaking to any specific religion at the moment. A lot of women will run to their spiritual leaders. Oh, he's beating me, and the spiritual leader will say that God said he's your head, you're supposed to stay, or they'll say fast and pray so that he will change. Why do we have to fast and pray for an abuser? It's a human thing. Stay there. You're supposed to stay there. If you leave him, you're going back to a man. You don't even know the men out there. They probably will do worse, and they will beat you too. And then they scare these women into staying in marriages that are deleterious to their health, because you're telling them that if they leave, they probably will fall into the hands of a worse abuser. The fact that we as a society has concluded that a certain demographic, and I'm talking about men, I'll just stay with the one that beats me but still provides for me. Talk to us about how some religious houses have encouraged this very terrible notion.
So the lady I talked about, who said she's been married for 32 years, that was part of what she quoted. She said, submission, live with your two legs. Because sometimes you say stay for the trauma. Exactly. So what would the children that you are saying you are staying for, watching you go through this, would you want them to grow up to be adults who perpetuate? So sometimes doing with survivors, you have to, like people going, they have to ask themselves, because I know we talk about support them, but you have to support yourself and ask yourself, is this really what I want? And even if you're saying you don't want to, in quote, complete, you can go very far away, but you are still carrying it, whatever it is you want. I'm not going to advise anybody what to do with it, but my point is, ask yourself, would you want to be dead or alive? Because and we've seen cases, I don't want to start, there have been quite a number of cases. In fact, there was one recently, I don't want to mention the name because of the person, it's a bit high profile, and she died. And
Oh no, we can. Austin, actually, we can. It's radio. We spoke about it here on radio.
So,
yes.
She died, and I'm sure she must have gotten the message. Oh, we don't do
Her
this.
husband was recently convicted. I think death by hanging.
Exactly. So So those are some hard questions you are, and I think sometimes when it comes, a lot of people are now saying women need to be able to. Of course, does not mean that you're yourself. You are still maintaining your relationship with your husband, but you must be empowered enough such that in case there is anything, please help yourself. And when it comes to religious organization, I think what I would say to, if there's anyone listening, support. Because we can't keep telling people, oh, this is what, okay, in case something happens, are you going to take responsibility for this person's babies? If the person does not die, what if the person is incapacitated for spoken of in such circles? Because like hush, 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 hush. But people need to start being taught. Wherever they go to worship, they need to be taught. The men need to be taught that this is how you, because even some religions will talk about it, everybody knows their place. Respect and love, because there's no violence. But two, let's retrain our people. Let's retrain them to have a D for me here. Do I want to continue? And if I continue, there's a possibility I may be unalived. Am I okay with that? My children, being there. And am I okay with my children growing up to be like this person? So yes.
Dr. Akpan, let's get your final word on this conversation. I would like for you to assume that there are victims that are listening. There are perpetrators that are listening as well. There are children who are probably listening at the moment and are wondering, when is my mom going to make that decision to leave? When is my dad going to stop? Or when is my mom going to stop assaulting my dad? Whatever the specific scenario is, what would you say to these people?
Okay, so I just want to encourage them to speak up. You may not know who to speak to. So I can talk about our website. We have a website, www.restforher.com. You can get information on, if you don't even understand what you're going through, if you don't even understand what SG addresses of organizations, you can get that on our website. So you can just check out the website. First of all, speak up. The first thing is realize that you need to speak up and don't be afraid. You may not know how to go about get it from our website. And just in case you have a trustworthy person beside you, maybe that you can speak to, a far-reaching effect for that individual. So just
for her, EHAI Nigeria, that's Equitable Health Access Initiative Nigeria, we spoke about in DU, and I hope that we can continue conversations like this one. It's not a one-time thing, because the statistics keep climbing. It's almost like as advocacy increases, we have more people who are perpetrating the crime, and I wonder why.
It's not that we're having more perpetrators. It's more people are speaking.
Exactly. Wonderful. All right, then. Well, people and amongst other things. So, but thank you so very much for joining us. The Morning Express still continues 98.